Hello, and thank you for joining us, Telegraph book clubbers. I'm Sophia Money-Coutts, writer, Telegraph columnist and author. And this evening we are being joined by, very thrillingly and quite intimidatingly, the Queen of Greece. Just kidding, because they got rid of them ages ago. But she's sort of the unofficial Queen of Greece because we have Victoria Hislop sitting here with us. Quickly, before I do, we get into the very exciting new book, which is out on Thursday. I have to do a bit of housekeeping, which is to tell you, you can make your video full screen if you want us even bigger by clicking, I think it's the square on the bottom right. So do that and we'll be enormous on your computer screen. So yes, you are sort of the unofficial Queen of Greece because you've now been made an honorary citizen and you took part in their version of Strictly a couple of years ago, I think?
I did, exactly 2 years ago today, I think.
No way, it kicked off?
It began, yes, it was September, towards the end.
So like ours, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, no, it tied in very nicely.
Okay.
And we even used the same costumes. So they were sort of flying between
week by week?
Athens. Well, depending on the dances that we were all doing, I'd watch somebody on, because I followed the Strictly in London very closely.
Yeah.
So I'd see how someone's cha-cha had gone. And then, lo and behold, the following week,
Get their sweaty dress. Sweaty, stinky armpits.
Think they had time to dry clean them. Anyway.
Sorry, it's completely irrelevant because this is book club, not dance club. So book club, Victoria, your new book, which I think is your 10th. I was doing some maths this morning, are we right?
Yes, it's my 10th book.
Congratulations, that's amazing. Your 10th book is out on Thursday, The Figurine, which hopefully book clubbers you can see there. I think the best place to start probably is if you just quickly, or not quickly, take as long as you'd like, explain in a nutshell what the story's about.
Well, it's about a young woman who is Anglo-Greek, who becomes involved in the crime of archaeological looting. And it's also a story of revenge, of love.
Yeah.
Of catharsis. It includes quite a lot of the period that I cover is during the junta time in Greece, which is a period of history I haven't really dared to go before, which was the 60... Well, because it was rather recent. It's the 67 to 74 dictatorship. And because that's in very much living memory of many people, I always thought if I describe that too much, the Greeks will come down on me like a ton of bricks.
They'll say you're not a citizen anymore. Get out.
I could get kicked out.
You don't want our telly.
I think I've become bolder.
Okay.
Because I have half an eye on my Greek audience, even though I'm primarily writing, obviously, in English and for my British audience. But as soon as the book is finished, it's being translated into Greek. And I face usually a sort of barrage of compliments and criticism there. It's a much tougher environment for me. Yeah.
So are you nervous, therefore, with this one, if this is more recently political, that the barrage of criticism, are you nervous that you've written about more recent history? And
yes, I'm sure definitely in live presentations get people who... because they're very open about being right and left and, nobody hides their politics in Greece. I will definitely get people who will harangue me from the audience about what a wonderful time the dictatorship was.
Okay.
But I'll be prepared with my suit of armour.
Yes. Okay, well, hopefully not too many. So obviously, for book clubbers, as Victoria just explained, it's set in Greece. I mean, well, they're mostly in Athens, I would say. Largely in Athens, is that fair?
Largely in Athens.
In this amazing apartment. I love the apartment so much. I don't want to give away, actually, what happens with the apartment, but it's so vivid, and you can sort of smell it and see it, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So that's one of the main settings,
it's
really, isn't it?
Again, normally in my books, I've written about people who come from quite humble backgrounds. It's just maybe because of friends that I know there and their politics, I tended to write about slightly more normal people. And this time I've chosen a very wealthy couple who were totally part of the kind of Athens establishment.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful area in Athens, which I was staying there last weekend because I really like it. and it's called Koloniki.
Okay.
And it's where, you know, wealthier people live.
Posh. The sort of Chelsea of Athens.
Yes,
is
it is
fair?
a little bit, and it's where all the embassies are, just on the
Okay.
edge of Koloniki. So it has quite a kind of.
Is it
different
near that bit where they
atmosphere.
march with their legs up? Because I
very
was
near.
dating a Greek man last year and I went to Athens
you?
and I'd never been to Athens before. That's all
Very
over.
much.
But I love my trip to Athens a lot.
Yeah, that's where
And,
the Parliament building is.
I know exactly
it's
where
just
that is.
opposite.
Oh, it is all, big
Yeah.
houses. And I was, funny enough, right, that makes sense. I was imagining the apartment in that area. Now that you reminded me what it's called and how it's pronounced, that makes sense.
So it's a wealthy, well-heeled, quite a sort of elegant. It's very elegant, the area. And then my protagonist also lives in a little market town in England.
Yep. Helena or Helena, do we say? Helena or Helena?
I think of her as Helena.
Helena, okay,
Yeah.
just to get that correct. And then, so I don't, as I said, want to give away too much of the story, but there's parts of it that are then set on islands, little islands, or there's a sort of, can we say there's a dig and there's excavations going? Yes, because we know it's about looting.
It's about archaeology.
And what I was fascinated by is that so there's an island called Nissos that I was Googling, having read the figurine. I was Googling thinking, I better look up this island and see what it's like. And I couldn't find it. And I thought I was going mad. And I thought, because there are practically thousands of Greek islands, aren't there?
There are hundreds of inhabited islands. And I actually wanted to make up a location, so that I could mix different islands in to
take bits,
rather than say, oh, it's Naxos, and then have audiences saying, oh, but there's no.
She got that bit wrong. Rubbish.
Yeah. So I've made up the island of Nissos, which is a sort of corruption of the word for island, which is Nissi. And then I've made up Amos, another one, which is connects with the word sand. And then Apalos, which just means pleasant and gentle. So
lovely.
I have 3 made-up islands, and it gives you much more freedom.
That's true. You can't potentially offend anyone. And were you saying that they're your first fictional islands in the book that you've written, which I think is really interesting. That this book you've made up fictional ones. And I can imagine actually the freedom and
There's
not
great
worrying
freedom.
about upsetting.
Yes, it's proper fiction, really.
Yeah.
Rather than always having, in a way, the weight of the real place.
Yes.
On your shoulders. And the little town in Suffolk is a made-up place called Delbridge.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Okay, so that's made up as well, so you can't offend any people in Suffolk. Okay, very good.
Exactly.
Because these days we have to be very careful about offending people with books. So, okay. And why the specific theme about looting and the fascination with that? Because the foreword in the book mentions looting, and I know that you are involved with the sort of giving the campaign to potentially give the Parthenon marbles back to Greece, to Athens. So was that something you feel very strongly about? And were you thinking about that while you were writing this?
Gosh, it's all really happened in the last 3 or 4 years, all of this kind of thought process about archaeology and where things should live. And the real beginning of it was rather sort of odd. I felt, because we have a house in Crete and I spend a lot of time in Crete.
Lucky you.
And there are archaeological remains everywhere. Everywhere you go, there's some little town on the hillside from 3,000 years before. And, you know, I always thought, gosh, I'm a bit stubborn about this, about archaeology. I really should try and understand it or be more interested.
Stubborn and you just sort of didn't join in or think about it much, or?
Just felt that I'm interested in the 20th century of Greek history.
Yeah.
And all the thousands of years before didn't really grab me emotionally. You know, you can go to Knossos, which is a must-see for anybody who visits Crete. But I can't imagine the people there walking around. You know, it doesn't have any real humanity for me.
Yeah.
So I decided I needed just to become more interested, you know, to learn something. And I hadn't got an idea for a book. It wasn't even, you know, searching for an idea, because I tend not to. And I met an archaeologist.
In Crete?
In Greece.
Okay.
A British archaeologist who happened to live very close to where our house is. And he took me to some of the places that he's been digging since the 60s. He's a wonderful man in his 80s. And he was very keen to show me his work. And I didn't like to tell him that up to now I'd not
Felt
really been
very
that
boring.
interested. But somehow he ignited my interest
Oh, wow.
by explaining the context.
Yeah.
And the lines of, I suppose, this continuous line of civilization that's existed in Crete from thousands BC up to now. And I thought, actually, this does matter. And especially when you go to a museum, which is always the best of, in a way, because you see the beautiful objects that the archaeologists have found. I thought, this is something I've been missing.
Yeah.
You know, that actually we aren't any better now as a civilization than the people
Possibly
who
worse.
were creating many of these things, all, 5,000 BC. And then I actually went on a live dig near it's an island off Naxos, and then it's off that island. So it took 3 days to get there. And there, the main story that the archaeologists talked about was the fact that a lot of the pieces had already been stolen. So their job could only ever be incomplete because they couldn't put the bits together to kind of make up the history or the speculation of what had happened. And I thought, people have stolen thousands of things here and sold them. And the particular thing that had been looted there were these cycladic figurines.
Oh, so I think at this point we have a prop, very excitingly, readers. We have this.
I promise you, this one is not stolen.
This was looted on the live dig that Victoria went on, and it's worth millions of dollars.
Stuck it in my very large pocket.
So really, as you'll see from the cover, that's the figurine that stars in the book. And again, without giving away too much, so there's a dig that takes place, and there is a bit of a doll, and there's some looting that goes on. Something is stolen.
And the motivation for me to write particularly about her is that I find these little statues incredibly beautiful, and 95% of the ones that have been found are women. So there was some rather wonderful worship of the female.
Right. So I was going to say, what, just for people watching at home, what is the in basic terminology, what does she stand for? Why did they make her look like that? Why did they make the same shapes
There's a lot
of
of mystery around her, partly because of the looting that's happened.
She's been stolen.
But they're generally found in graves, so they were a grave item. And this one, being from a tourist shop, has a stand, but
Very
generally
authentic.
they don't have a stand.
Okay.
So if you can see their sort of anatomy, they weren't made to stand up, they were made to lie down.
Wow.
So the archaeologists believe that they were put in the grave to keep the dead person company. Generally, they have a very small sign of a protruding abdomen.
So pregnant or just womanly?
To show fertility.
Okay.
Yeah.
Big dinner.
Small breasts, always.
Okay.
And the arms always folded in that very particular way, which is quite mysterious. The left on top of the right. So there's mystery around them because so many have gone missing.
So we don't know why specifically they were made. They were put in graves, we think.
No,
we
they
just
can't
don't know
tell.
why.
I mean, this is a time, these were date back to 5,000 BC. Wow. But before any, actually most of them 3,000, 3,500. But they were made in a period before there was any writing. So there's no actual way of being sure about why they were all very much based on the model of this one, with the same nose, this little pubic triangle.
Her bikini bottoms.
Yeah, and the way she stands, and
wow.
Some of them look up to the stars.
Okay.
They have a more tilted head. But yeah.
And they have been sold, is it true? Because
there's...
for literally millions of dollars.
Yes.
Okay.
In a sense, it's hard to say that modern artists made them a problem, but people like Modigliani and Henry Moore were equally inspired by this kind of simplicity of form, because she does look very modern.
Yeah,
And
in many ways, yeah.
some of their sculptures, you know, are not replicas, but they have the same kind of very pared back shape. And that made people think, oh, I would like one of those in my house. And the most expensive one ever was about $16 million that was sold at Christie's.
Wow.
And many of them that were looted, because they don't get registered, they disappear into private collections.
I'm sure.
So,
but where do we stand on? So people, so it's all right. It's a funny one, isn't it? People can pay $16 million for them.
yeah.
And is that all right then if they're being taken out of the country? I suppose it's that.
Well, it's illegal now.
To buy them, for those to be
or
sold.
for anything to be taken out of the country. There's a lot of legislation around
protecting
you know, things that are found in Greece or Italy or anywhere in the world. Now there's a UNESCO agreement that they have to
I didn't
be
realise that. Okay.
registered.
Right.
But even so, they get looted. So
and it's still going on now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you went on that live dig, and they were digging for those dolls, and that captivated you. And then how did you go about weaving the story and coming out with Helena and combining the political period of the time? And how does that all come about?
Gosh, well, I began with myself.
Okay.
Because at the heart of any novel, I'm in there somewhere.
Okay. Well, that's quite refreshing to say, actually, because I think there's a lot of female writers, I think, there's a lot of people bridle quite often at being asked, you know, how autobiographical is this novel? And I never mind when people ask that, but inevitably I think we put ourselves in books because that's what we know.
I think
right?
You can't not.
Yeah, no, I
Even
completely
if you
agree.
think that you're not, you're in there somewhere. Unless, let's say if I wrote a book that only had male characters, I might not find my way in there.
You never know.
But when I thought about the Junta period, which began in '67, I thought, well, that was when I was alive. I was 7 or 8 years old. You know, I didn't read the Telegraph in those days, although
fairly
it was
soon
lying
after you
around.
probably did start reading the Telegraph, didn't you?
And I thought, well, that's sort of my childhood coming into that. And that bit was quite easy because I've never written about my own childhood. And there it was, you know, it was the period of time when we did our homework by candlelight because the electricity went off. It was sort of in fact, the early days. We see Helena beginning to take an interest in current affairs because she has this sort of Greek element in her life which slightly broadens her horizons. And, you know, it was fun to describe what I was wearing. It sounds odd, but, you know, cheesecloth. I didn't have to research. What did teenagers wear in 1972? I know, because I was there wearing the cheesecloth shirt and the loons.
Flares,
and
then?
the flare. Oh, well, they were loons. They
I don't know about loons.
They went quite down and then they went like that. And you went to Kensington Market to buy them. And then the long, slightly sort of floaty skirts and all of that. And then describing a little bit how Oxford was, because she goes to Oxford. And she's a scientist, which I'm very much not. So I was trying to disguise myself.
Yeah, she's a chemist, isn't she?
Yes.
She's
because I wanted that to kind of knit in with what happens to her later. So there are certain kind of points in the book which I plant because I know I want to tie them
Come
in.
back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there were other things that I was going through a period where I wanted to write about my mother and the death of my mother. So, you know, this all sounds a little bit random, as though the plot is just like a jigsaw where all the bits on the floor and you try and make a pattern. But
together.
There were things that I was going through emotionally and I needed to put that in. And then the Greek side of her, which is obviously not me, because I am by blood 100% British, but having citizenship and spending as much time as I do there, I definitely think I know what it feels like to be Greek. So,
and you speak Greek now, right?
Yes, I speak Greek. Yeah. So all of that kind of wound together, and then for sure, with a lowercase p, I should say, to Telegraph readers, because I know it's kind of slightly in the opposite sort of direction to how many people believe, but I'm very committed to the cause of the Parthenon sculptures.
Yes. Yeah.
And become progressively more passionate.
And the cause being them being returned back to Greece.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And essentially, although it was done in broad daylight and took over 2 years to take them, the sculptures, you know, in my view, were looted because Elgin didn't have permission to take them officially. You know, there's a lot of, let's say, inaccuracy around the story that's told by the British Museum.
Yeah.
Not, well, I don't know, wouldn't like to say maliciously, but when you go into that museum, into the very gloomy Juvine Gallery where they're kept, you could easily get the impression that Elgin brought them back for the nation.
For safekeeping.
And he brought them back to decorate his own house.
I didn't realise this until I was researching for this. So he brought them back to decorate his own house, but
Absolutely.
then the hacking them off was so expensive that he ran up enormous debt. So then he had to sell them when he got back to the UK, to the British Museum.
They never got to his home.
These
and so they're in
dodgy
London.
toffs.
He's bankrupt.
Yeah.
His wife has left him, which I think created financial difficulties too. And he is desperate for money. And the 35,000 that he was given by the British Museum paid the cost of all the labour that had been used to bring them down from the temple. And the shipping, which you can imagine was a huge undertaking. In fact, one of the ships sank just off Kythera.
With bits on it, so we lost lots of bits.
Yeah, well, they got the bits up somehow. Somehow they retrieved them, but he had a boat that sank. So he was a bit of a loser, Elgin, to be honest. That's how I see him. I don't quite pity him.
No.
But
an opportunist, I think.
An opportunist, yes. I mean, that's a nice way of putting it.
Which actually, I suppose, again, without giving away the plot, there is a sort of posh pretender opportunist in the novel, isn't there?
There is.
Was that sort of influenced by?
Yes, I would say
Nasty Nick.
It probably.
Words didn't really say
you could say Nasty Nick,
Don't want to
because I
give away
think
the
any intelligent reader, and of course all my readers are very intelligent, will spot
Naturally.
him a mile off.
Well, I quite loved him at the beginning, actually, because he's so handsome.
Oh yeah, it's women. That's the problem. One of the
my
themes,
problem.
underlying themes of this story, is the power of beauty. In a way, because it's what it's all about.
Yeah.
People are seduced by beauty,
Mesmerised,
and they lose their ability to kind of make decent decisions.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So yes, I like Nick too. I mean, in a love and hate way, because he is a chancer.
Yeah.
And it's always more fun writing the baddie. In a way.
Yeah.
You can't have all your characters being heroes.
Being too good.
And in fact, it was a strange thing in the last 2 years. I think it's been on in London several times, and every time I went to Greece, it was on again, was the play Medea.
Oh, yes.
And essentially she's a heroine, isn't she?
Yeah.
She's the heroine of that play.
Yeah.
And yet she murders her children.
Yeah.
You know, you can have very, very flawed, terrible people, but they are your main character.
Yeah, so there's that scene in there, that little glimpse of it.
Yeah, where Helena is kind of, it lives with her, the sight of this very angry woman.
Yeah,
and she learns how to be angry.
Yeah, well, actually, on that point, I was particularly captivated because there's sort of this first love storyline, isn't there, that runs throughout it, or, from when they meet. And there was a bit that she said, I actually wrote it down in my notes, but I'm not going to be able to find it now because I've written so many things here. But there's a bit when here we go. There's a few lines at the end of a chapter when it says, the following morning she woke full of rage, an emotion she'd never felt before. It was even stronger than love. And I remember that thing when you've been so in love and it's the first time that you're sort of crossed and it is so painful. And I was very struck by that bit. Did you consciously want to create a first love story?
Well, she is quite a naive young woman.
Yeah.
And she's come from this small little town in Suffolk where nothing happens of any, nothing terrible happens in Delbridge, except people nicking things in Woolies. So, yes, I think I think most people know it, the power of that first love.
Yeah.
The first cut is the deepest. Rod Stewart and,
Yeah. Had it right. Very true.
Euripides, all of them know about that because you don't really know. It's all chemicals, isn't it, ultimately?
Yeah.
It's not really anything intelligent going on in your brain.
No,
it's
and then you
pure,
think, how could they? How could they do
and
this?
she's never slept with anyone before, and suddenly this guy just makes love to her in his sordid college bedroom, and life is sort of beginning for her.
And outside on the beach or whatever it is, on the island.
So,
Yeah.
I think she's quite a typical young woman, maybe more of the 80s, early 80s than, 2023. But
it's a pretty romantic scene, though, isn't it? When being in Greece on an island with this handsome boy, I can see you get very swept up in that,
Yes.
Bless her,
yeah.
of course she will.
Yes, and she does.
Yeah.
And we'll see. We better not say how bad
No,
he
no,
is.
exactly. I don't want to give away any more than that. I'm sure you do always get asked, why do you keep returning to Greece? But you do return to Greece. I mean, obviously there's your book about Spain, but why does it still sort of compel you so much? And how do you keep finding new stories?
Gosh, well, stories are just always waiting. They find you.
Okay.
It's about the only thing I know about story writing.
So you never panic when you finish a book and think, oh my God.
Not at all. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No. I mean, Stephen King wrote the best book ever, and it's called On Writing.
I love it, yes. And the aspiring writers, I would say, read it.
It's just wonderful. And he compares the sort of process of storytelling with being an archaeologist. I don't know if you...
I can't remember
he says
it.
The stories they're there, waiting just to be dug up.
Yeah, dusted
and it's
off.
A great metaphor for me, that you don't really... People who sort of chew the end of their pencil and discuss with their boyfriend or their wife, what they're going to write and will this work, will that, they haven't actually found the story, I don't think. I think it's something you know, and they are waiting. Nothing is really made up by novelists. It's stuff that's kind of already there.
Yes, I do agree with that. Well, the other bit that I remember from this book, and I really, again, if anyone's watching this who wants to write or has an idea of a story, I so recommend reading On Writing by Stephen King. Or I've listened to the Audible version as well, and that's also brilliant because I think he reads it.
Yeah.
And it's just another way to sort of digest all the brilliant things that he tells you about writing. But I remember the other thing that he says, one of the many other brilliant things he says in that book is the stories might be there, but also you have to sit down and try and get to them. This thing of sort of drifting about, whenever I'm sort of trying to come up with a new novel idea, I do quite a lot of walking and the sort of belief that romantically something's just going to waft into my head and then I can sit down and I can write pages and pages. Actually, you have to sit down, and for the muse, I think he even talks about the muse, for the muse to land on your shoulder, you have to be sitting down trying to write. You're not just probably going to be in the shower or on a lovely walk somewhere. You may be struck with inspiration at those moments, but actually you do have to spend quite a lot of time sitting down and concentrating for it to work. And I think do you find that?
I totally live by his principles. They just resonated with me when I read that book. And I thought, you don't just sit down when you feel like it. You sit down at 9 in the morning.
It is a job. You've still got to treat it like a job.
Like a job, but a job you're very lucky to have.
Yeah.
So that's how I, and it's doesn't actually connect with your question about why Greece, but I think Greece is full of so much drama and pain and lots of anger and love. It's full of extreme emotions. Everybody there is, you never meet anyone bland when you go to Greece.
Lots of characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of progressively become less likely that I'll find a story anywhere else because it's where I go, where I spend a lot of my time.
Yeah.
And you know, I never feel that I'll run out.
No.
There's always something extraordinary. I mean, just tiny things that people tell me. You know, last week when I was there, this friend said, "Oh, there was this really weird woman in town last week. She went to that wedding dress shop. We were sitting having a coffee. Very fancy, fluffy wedding dress shop.
Okay.
And this woman, who was about 50 years old and had never been married, she went in and bought a dress, hired a photographer, and had those very romantic, dreamy pictures taken of herself.
Sort of sunsets.
And I thought, wow, what
photos.
a character.
Yeah.
So she was being the bride,
Yeah.
but she'd kind of run out of hope
Yeah.
that she was going to have that kind of wedding.
Yeah.
And then she got some of my friends to kind of stand, you know, it was kind of tragic, but I thought, that's a character.
But good on her, in a
Good
way.
on
You
her.
know, yeah,
Yeah,
she's making it
because-
happen for herself.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that there are many, many eccentric
Yeah.
people in Greece.
Yeah.
And
So my
yeah.
big fat Greek wedding is the next book.
yeah, I think we've had film number 3, haven't we?
Yeah, something like
I
that.
went to a wedding with 3,500 people last week in Crete.
Wow.
Insane. I didn't
How long
even...
does that go on for? Where do you
Well,
even do that?
It was
in
a pre
sports hall?
for about 4 or 5 days. Oh no, they have wedding venues.
Okay.
If you're wealthy.
I'm very naive about Greek weddings.
you
Sorry, I've never been to
hire
one.
These huge, they call them ethruses, just...
Oh
it's a bit like going to the Grosvenor House ballroom,
Okay.
but you have 3 of them in sort of together in a circle.
Goodness.
So yeah, much inspiration. If you're ever lacking ideas,
Yeah.
hop on a plane
A Greek wedding.
to Athens or
Does that go on all
Crete.
day? I'm fascinated by this. Do they go on all day and
It
all
went
night?
on all day and all night. I mean, I left way before it finished.
5 in the morning. Do you write in Greece? Do you write out at your house in Crete?
I do.
Okay.
Yes, very
Can you?
much.
And parts of this, can you write it in the UK, or do you need to be when you're writing about Athens or the, in this case, fictional
Yeah.
islands? But do you need to be on location, as
I
it were?
prefer to be. Can't always be practical.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as Stephen King says, you've got to be sitting at a desk with your discipline. So if I'm not in the place that I'm writing about, then I listen to music.
What music?
Well, people like Theodorakis,
Okay,
who's their kind of, I wouldn't say he's the equivalent of Beethoven because he's much more recent than that, but a very political composer of the 20th century. And he wrote a lot of orchestral music, so I can't listen to words, but
Yeah.
I always have music on.
And do you have to have? I've listened to writers talk about this because I can't write to music. I'm always fascinated when people can. Do you change music for books, or can you write? Because some people get into literally. I can't remember who it is now. There's some writer who literally it's one song that he has per book, and he will just listen to that song on repeat.
Oh
I
my
mean,
goodness.
for months. I wish I could remember who it is. I will remember who it is, and then we'll put it up on a Telegraph event somewhere. Because I was absolutely fascinated by that, and imagine
that
hearing
sounds
one
like you
song.
go mad.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I don't have one. I need a big,
Okay.
many hours.
Assortment of music.
Yeah, big assortment. And in fact, there's a lot of music talked about in here, or written about,
Yeah.
because there's a particular singer who started recording during the junta period, and his music was banned, and then he kind of reappears in the period afterwards in the Metapolitevsi, and then he becomes a hero of the Greek people.
Yeah.
Because he's still singing now. He's singing tonight in Athens in a huge. He's the most popular singer in the whole of Greece. So I did listen to him a lot when I was writing, because he's actually an offstage character
Relevant
in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Can we just touching on that actually? Can we talk about your research? Because all of your books, really, or a good number of them, there's a lot of very researched history that's gone into them. And I was on your website doing research for this, and I couldn't get over. I was so in awe of the very, very long reading list that it felt like you have read for every single book, which, obviously you have to do. You're researching real events. But it seems like you're very methodical and painstaking about it, which is interesting because you studied English at university, but were you also always fascinated by history?
No, I didn't do it. I didn't do A-level history,
Oh, wow,
which
okay.
shows how low down it was in my kind of priorities. And I don't actually think I'm very methodical, although it's nice of you to think I am.
It reads like
because
you are.
every single book that I list on that list of things I've read, if you look in the back of any non-fiction book, there's pages of bibliography, and I'm always humbled by that. I think the person who's given me this information has read 100 books to give me this.
To distill it down.
So I always feel I have never done enough because really any non-fiction book I read, I should then read the 100 books that he also read. But life is too short, and but quite often the reading takes you on a path. You know, there'll be something in that book that makes you think, oh, actually, I'm more interested in that. It's a very exciting 2-year journey for me.
So it is basically 2 years that you spend on every one.
Yeah.
And do you try and get, for instance, all the reading and research done before?
Yes, so
I'm
it's 2
always
years of
fascinated by the
that.
sort of process.
Yeah, 2
of
years
writers.
of the reading, the travelling,
Yeah.
going on digs in this case.
Yeah.
And,
Looting dolls.
yeah, finding dolls in tourist shops. And then at the end of that, I've already got some kind of synopsis in my mind.
Okay.
And then I write a very detailed synopsis.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we sort of literally breakdowns of chapters.
More or less.
Wow.
Yeah, well, it starts kind of something short.
Yeah.
And then I work on it and work on
Yeah.
it until it sort of maps out the chapters.
And then do you pretty much stick to that?
Pretty much.
Oh, wow.
Pretty
Okay.
much.
Yeah.
But things happen, surprises happen.
Yeah.
On the way. So, you know, when I look at it at the end, I'm often quite, I think, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't see that happening.
Yeah.
So I'm not a slave to it.
Yeah.
But it makes me feel secure.
Yeah.
So that when I've got my sort of Stephen King days of, right, you just sit down at 9, open your laptop, start, I kind of have got a frame that I'm fitting
You know
into.
where you're writing to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think is helpful rather than writing into an abyss when you think, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, people do. It's a sort of, there's a much more of a free form way of writing.
Yeah.
That I admire people who can do it,
I've
but it's
had
not me.
Marianne Keyes once talk about the fact that she just sits down, she literally has no idea, and she just sits down with characters and starts writing, and that sort of brings that in hive practice. I think that is so amazing that she can sit down and sort of these characters just appear.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm sort of endlessly fascinated by how people do it, how people get the words out.
Yes, I
it's
think
amazing.
that's probably rather lovely, just to have characters.
Yeah.
I did once have a collection of sort of Duplo dolls.
Okay.
In fact, it was given to me by a really lovely writer called Francesca Seagull.
Oh yes,
You know,
yes,
whose
yeah.
dad wrote Love Story.
Yeah.
And she gave me, because we had a talk about, you know, what fun it would be just to maybe imagine
As
your
characters.
characters, have them on your desk. And so sometimes I get those out.
Oh,
Yeah.
and sort of move them around.
Yeah, I'll just look at them and think, that's who you are.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I want to give that a go. Okay. The other thing I really loved about this was all the food, because I am basically incredibly greedy, and the food running throughout is wonderful. There's sort of cheese pies, and there's a ground minced lamb thing at some point, and the dolmades, and Are you a foodie? Was that conscious?
I'm not particularly, but the Greeks are.
Yeah.
It's very important to them.
Yeah.
And particularly if you have a character who wants to show you their place. I think the most foodie scene is with the maid when she's moved back to Kalamata.
Yes, I love that.
They have all the sort of Peloponnesian
Local.
specialities. And yes, when I'm in Greece, you know, I'm much more interested in food because every area that you go to, they want to show you their speciality.
Yes.
And they are all, you know, people who think it's just kebabs and moussaka, you know,
Tzatziki.
missing a lot, you know, because every island will have something that they do particularly well, or every town. So yeah, food, I couldn't write a book set in Greece without people having lovely meals.
No, I could just sort of smell it and sense it, and yeah, that was very sort of evocative throughout. Yeah, no, it's lovely. I really enjoyed that. So what is next? So the next one is going to be Greece then? Can we talk about the next?
But
Okay.
I haven't dug up my archaeological
Fine, okay. So
story
that's
idea.
a work in progress.
And I'm not kind of worrying about it because I know it will come
Yeah.
somehow.
Fine.
It will present itself.
Fine. So you'll just relax. You're sort of content to be relaxed, and the idea will just.
Oh gosh, there's people who deliver one book and they've half written the next one. I just think, don't you give yourself a little bit of a break?
Yes. Yes, no, quite sort of. Well, there'll be a lot going on, obviously, because this book is out on Thursday. A lot of,
Yeah, because I travel to Greece to promote it there, so I've got to face my barrage of angry people who loved the Colonel's dictatorship, and I know I will meet them. And then there's France, because I do a lot of promotion in France as well.
Okay.
So that'll take me up till Christmas.
Yeah. How's your French?
And it's good. I mean, that's why I think why I can do it, because I don't like being translated. I can't bear it.
Oh, but do you speak Spanish as well? Because
very much more primitive Spanish. I did more when I was writing my Spanish book.
Yeah.
So I spent months and months living in Spain.
Yeah.
But that slightly got pushed aside by the Greek now.
Yeah.
So I can only deal with 3 languages in my
No,
head.
I think 3 languages is pretty good.
Yeah, it's enough for me. My small head.
No, that's very brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, well, I think we're probably almost ready to take. I think some of you have been sending in some questions, so I'm going to pick up my whizzy iPad here and have a look at some of these in no particular order. Well, actually, topical to what we've just been discussing from Anonymous. Mm-hmm. Will you write another book based in Spain?
Oh, no, I don't think I will.
Okay.
Actually.
Simple answer.
Because I would need to go and live there again, and I don't have any particular connections with Spain anymore. I think Greece has just sort of taken me over.
Greece is the place. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So sorry about that, Anonymous.
Sorry, Anonymous. One that's just come in from Fred. I wouldn't be saying surnames anyway, but Fred. Have you ever based a character in your book on Ian?
Oh, I love it.
Should we explain? I mean, people probably know.
Oh, yes, I'm married to Ian Hislop,
yes.
who is, gosh, what is he?
Television star.
I could describe him, editor of Private Eye. I think the father, Ian's a very, like many people are in their professional lives and in their private lives, two quite different people. And he's a very loving, gentle, wonderful father. So any British father figures definitely have an element of Ian in them.
So Hamish in this was sort of the elements of that.
Yeah,
I love that.
He's a nice chap who can't cook. If I had to sum Ian up in a sentence, that's how I would describe him. Gentle chap, can't cook.
Yes, no, he's very lovely, Hamish in that. Okay, brilliant. One from Richard here. Hang on. Oh, okay, here we go. I'm going to embarrass myself, Richard, by mispronouncing this word. Dear Victoria, very polite. When have you become a Philhellene?
That's good.
From what age? Is that right?
Yeah, it's Philhellene.
Okay. Philhellene. From what age and what initially sparked your interest?
A very specific moment in 1977 when I went to Athens with my mother and my sister for our first visit to Greece.
On holiday?
On holiday, yeah. And we had a week in Athens and then a week in Paros.
Okay.
And it was just life-changing for me. I absolutely loved it.
Okay.
And I can still particularly remember Paros because I'd never swum in sea, that colour, that warmth, that clarity. And somewhere, and interestingly, it's completely illegal, and I'm now declaring it as a sort of a sin to have done this. I have a tiny little matchbox full of tiny shells.
So you looted?
I shouldn't have done because you're not meant to take anything with you. But back in the 70s, we were less tuned into these things. But I didn't find any old bits of pottery or ceramic and put them in my suitcase. But I just fell in love with it.
And do you still have them, the little shells?
Shells, yes, I do. Yes, I absolutely do. And they're a quarter of the size of a fingernail, and I was just enchanted. I'd only ever seen sort of mussel shells and cockle and oyster shells on, Winchelsea Beach.
Robbie old British beaches.
Yeah, Bognor Regis, which was our holiday sort of topos then. And my parents had got divorced. This is why life changed in all sorts of ways when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And it meant my mother had to get a job, and her priority was to take us
Away.
on beautiful educational holidays.
Yeah. Quite right.
And I'm very grateful to
Yeah.
her.
Did you say you were 7? It was 1977?
77, so I was about 16,
Oh,
17.
you were a teenager.
Yeah.
Because Helena goes, so is that loosely based? So Helena, we start the book really with Helena's first trip to
Yeah.
Athens, don't we?
Yeah, she's not me then.
And did you draw on that? Okay, fine. No, because she's a
Yeah.
lot younger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But again, it's very evocative, that opening, the scene, I
Yes.
think, where she arrives in Athens. It's hot and it's
Exactly.
so different.
And also at that time, the airport, which was at Glyfada, the old airport, before they moved it closer to the city. And I remember that moment of just everything shimmering, literally, like it does when you get off. And it was very unfamiliar. And oddly,
heat would be
my
quite unfamiliar.
sister has really never been back. She doesn't like going anywhere. And I can't keep away.
Yeah,
so
you sort of
it
made it your
wasn't
life.
a universal effect.
Yeah.
It was just me thinking, this is my place. I like
How
this.
funny, had you known then when you were, what did you say, 16, that, you know, how many years later
Yeah.
you'd have sold millions and millions of books and
Well,
be the honorary queen of the country?
I didn't want to write one then, so.
What did you want to do then?
Then I think I wanted to be a tennis player about that age because
Okay.
it was glamorous.
Okay.
And there were lots of very successful teenage tennis players.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't really think I knew what I wanted to do, in as much as anybody actually knows how their career will map out. But I definitely didn't want to write novels.
Oh, wow. So when did that come about then?
When I was about 45.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was when you published, that was
The
when The Island came out?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you knew this is the life
And
for
then
me.
I thought, oh, this is nice,
Yeah.
writing stories. People like them.
Yeah.
And I can go to Greece and tell people it's research.
Yeah.
Which it sort of is.
It's true.
It's true.
It's your work, it's your
true,
job,
But it's
yeah.
still, you know, I love the warmth
Yeah.
on my skin.
Yeah.
Why
not?
Particularly.
We
Love
go into a
it.
British winter. Fair enough. Right, hang on. I'm going to scroll through all these questions. Thank you very much for sending them in. Oh, Susan, we just sort of answered your question there. Did you always think you'd become a novelist? Which was sort of no then.
No.
Tennis player it was going to be.
Definitely not.
Christine, now that your interest has been sparked in archaeology and ancient Greece, would you think of writing a novel about those times?
I think the ancient world is being so wonderfully written about, you know, the myths, the retelling of the myths by people like Natalie Haynes and, you know, Madeline Miller.
Madeline Miller, that's what I was just thinking
You know,
of,
really, they've just seized those myths, and I admire them massively for what they're doing and what they have done and how they've created this huge interest. So I would definitely not go into that
Further back.
Yeah. No, I think that would, if I was sort of 25 and starting off, I might think, gosh, I wonder if I could do that. But no, I think they're, you know, really doing it wonderfully well and have created almost a new genre.
Yeah.
Which is a great surprise. And it's all about the women. A lot of them are, you know, the female characters that they're writing about. So I'd say no, I won't go back. I think I'm stuck in the 20th century.
Fine. But that's a good place for you, I think. So that's, you know.
Yeah, I think I'm happy there. It's I can find people who were alive during some of the periods that I'm writing about. You know, for example, when I write about the islands of exile, the Mykonissos, you know, where people were imprisoned during the junta, you know, I've met them. I've actually, and even if I'm not using their stories, just to feel, you know, what they went through and to see how they talk is incredible. Whereas I can't go and find, you know, Odysseus or, you know, he's not around to have a chat.
No. And I think, did you do that for the island as well? Did you find relatives or descendants? Or, I mean, could you, that same sense of being able to sort of touch the past almost?
You could
it was
touch
recent
the past because it was recent, but at that time I didn't speak a word of Greek.
Okay.
So I was unable to engage anyone, although they were there, but I didn't know they were there.
Yeah.
So that was all, in a way, much more off the top of my head. Just the imagining of what it was like.
Yeah, okay. Right, hang on. Sarah, we have just returned from Malta, such a wonderful place to discover more about the history of the Maltese islands and the Med, from Neolithic times to the Knights of St John to World War II to the present day. Would love to read a novel written by you, Victoria, about Malta. Perhaps one day? ... Question mark.
Certainly very rich history, Malta,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm not aware...
The Knights of Malta, I still get a bit confused by.
Yeah, of novels that have taken... And there probably
Is
are
anyone
lots.
doing that?
They
Yeah.
can send in answers. So
Yeah.
I love the idea. I'm quite attracted by it, but I don't think I can get the depth of knowledge about it now.
Because you have such a depth of knowledge about
I feel
Greece.
the more I know about Greece, I don't want to waste the knowledge that I have that I haven't used.
Yeah.
And so I think
And
it sounds
ask
awful, doesn't it? Say sorry, not likely.
Well, never say never, but...
Never say never.
Yes.
No.
Anonymous, I think this is quite a good one, again, for any aspiring writers, because I know people often feel daunted by this process. Hello, Victoria. How long did it take you to write and find... Well, she's talking about your first novel. How long did it take you to write and find a publisher?
That was an interesting one. I love to tell this story because being a story about leprosy, I faced many rejections because even leprosy itself has a stigma.
Yeah.
It's a disease unlike any other that just creates this sort of aversion in people.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it sort of applied to the idea as much as to the subject matter. So that, you know, presenting publishers with they wanted a love story set on a Greek island.
Yeah.
They really liked that idea
Yeah.
because Captain Corelli had
kind
of been out and been a huge success. But the leprosy put them off. So it took quite a long time.
Yeah. Had you written the whole book when you were submitting it to
No,
agents
I'd
or publishers?
written a synopsis.
Okay.
And I think 3 chapters.
Fine.
And for some reason, I don't know why, I felt that I wanted to do it that way rather than write the whole thing. Because I knew if I did it, it would require a lot of research.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to have some kind of reassurance that I wouldn't be wasting my time. So eventually I found a publisher.
Fine.
But the rejection, I don't still have the rejection letters, that would be very negative. But it wasn't easy, and you have to persevere. If you believe you have a really good idea, don't be put off by people saying no thank you.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't stop it being a good idea. And if you have a lot of conviction, then, you know, that can really fill you with fire.
Yeah. On that note, I listened to a brilliant podcast with Bonnie Garmus, who wrote Lessons in Chemistry, which I'm sure a lot of readers viewers have read. Very brilliant. But Bonnie Garmus, I think, not with Lessons in Chemistry, but she notched up 99 rejections over the course. She was a copywriter and she was always trying to write novels, and she notched up 99 rejections. And I think at about 72, her husband said, "Are we going to carry on with this thing? Are we going to keep going with this writing idea?" And she did keep going. And now look, Lessons in Chemistry has sold practically billions of copies. I think the TV show's about to land any second. And I felt incredibly sort of cheered and amazed and in awe of that, because she just, did keep going.
I didn't know that.
Anyone watching who's had a few rejections, keep going, because Bonnie Garmus has done all right, and she had 99 of them. So.
And I don't think J.K. Rowling was instantly snapped up.
No, I think, again,
Was
she was turned out, the boy wizard, and I think people went, "What? The boy what?" Not interested in that.
So no, don't be deterred.
You just have to keep going and develop, I think, a really thick skin. Another anonymous, if you were starting now, would you choose the self-publishing route? Again, on the same theme.
Oh, it must be very tempting, because that didn't exist, when I was starting out. So it wasn't there as an option. I mean, I think if you do self-publish, you've got to be very sort of savvy about promoting and...
well, you have to do it all, don't you?
Yeah.
Quite tough.
Yeah, I think it would be tough.
Yeah.
But, it can happen. And I've recently read a really brilliant book that was self-published by a kind of youngish writer.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, why hasn't this been picked up?
Yeah, well, I think more people are. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that
Can you remember what that was?
publishers-
I'm just thinking if
Yes,
readers are
it was
interested.
called Poacher's Priest.
Okay.
And
Good title.
it was rather original. But I hope that he'll use it to send to publishers, because I think if a book is good, it needs to
Properly marketed.
reach the
Well,
audience.
E.L. James, 50 Shades of Grey, of course.
Oh,
that was
true.
self-published.
Yes, true.
And again,
Good
she did all right.
example.
So again, you know, you never know. Hang on, I'm just scrolling through. Thank you for sending through so many questions, everyone. Hello, Victoria. This is from Kate. I think we've covered the first question. Kate, you've technically included 3 questions here, but we'll allow it. Did you always envisage being a best-selling author, which I suppose we've touched on, but the best-selling thing is interesting. And which was your most challenging novel to date?
Oh, right. No. Anyone who envisages, I can't even say it, envisages themselves as a best-selling author, gosh, that's a terrible path, terrible fantasy.
I suppose you can dream of it, can't you?
Yeah, maybe people do. I don't know. I mean, because that book was about leprosy, I never imagined it would sell. I was thrilled when I found a publisher, but I certainly didn't envisage it would sell in 40
So you had no idea.
be translated into 40 languages. And a bit of me still doesn't really understand, the appeal. I think it has that book must appeal to readers in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
So no, I think when you write, you're telling a story, and the story is first and foremost you're telling it to yourself, and maybe in your mind to one other person.
Yes.
And if you can keep one other person interested and yourself, that's justification in a way. That's your your activity is to keep a tiny audience interested and to tell a story. And then once you're writing it, you're normally enjoying it so much you don't really think, oh, I wonder if this will sell 5,000 or 15,000.
It's going to hit the bestsellers.
It's lovely if it does, but you need to be pleased with the book regardless. If it's the best you can do, which it should be, it's the best you can do whether 15,000 people think so or 15 million. And I'm sure that's the sort of integrity of writing. I'm not, claiming I'm unique in thinking that, but I'm quite sure that I have quite a few friends who are very best-selling novelists, and I know they don't do it because they're best-selling novelists. It just becomes what they love doing, and once you become formulaic, I think you're in danger.
Well, I suppose no one would go into writing really to make money, would they? So
No, not
you would never
really.
set out thinking I'm going to. Although actually, I remember what someone once saying. John Grisham apparently did study the top 10 in America or something. I don't know if we're now going to get legal or sued by John Grisham. But he and his wife literally studied the top bestsellers in America to work out what the formula was.
Yes.
So I've always remembered that. I mean, thought that was quite an interesting way around it. But yeah.
Well done him.
Yeah,
Good
exactly.
studying.
Well done
he
him.
is a lawyer too, isn't he?
Oh, God,
I think,
please
John
don't write us a letter,
Grisham.
John Grisham. I love your books. Right, I'm being waved at. So I think on that note, thank you so much, Victoria, for joining us. And congratulations on your brilliant, brilliant new book, which I recommend everyone buys on Thursday when it's out in all good bookshops. And best of luck with it.
Oh, thank you very much. I've
I'm gonna
enjoyed
pop
it.
my whizzy iPad down. And then I think there's one housekeeping note which I've forgotten, which I have to say. I have to thank you for your time. Oh, and thank you guys for joining. And then please, everyone, keep an eye on the Telegraph events page for other events, other book clubs, offers, competitions. I think that's all the things I have to say. So thank you again very much. And everyone rush to the bookshops on Thursday morning when the figurine will be there.
Thank you very much, Sophia.